If you've listened to any of our other podcasts, you know we've interviewed several different people that have had a story that starts with some version of, well, I was raised in the church. But we know that that's not true for everyone, and it's not true for our guest today, Abi Chambers. So if you'd like to hear a story of coming to faith in a different way than many of our people here at Clear Creek have experienced, I think you're in for a treat. Let's chat about it. Welcome to Clear Creek Chat. That's Chat with two T's because this podcast is coming to you from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is a ministry of the Clear Creek Church of Christ. In each episode, we gather together a friend or two to talk about issues that touch our lives locally and have broader implications for the kingdom of God. My name is Mitchell Halstead, and today my guest is my friend, Abi Chambers.
Hi.
We are so glad to have her today. She's going to tell us her story of coming to faith. And to kind of introduce who she is, Abi is married to Michael Chambers, who's been on a few of these podcasts. He's my partner here in the youth ministry, but they moved here, I don't know, getting close to 2 years ago, I guess, and came out of college and various ministry related activities there. But the reason we've got her on today is because unlike many of the people we've talked to on this podcast so far, and frankly, many of the people at our church, though not everyone, Abi was not raised in the church. So we wanted to give her a chance today to tell her story of coming to faith and let that sort of unravel how it has led to her being very missional in her life as an adult person so far. So we're going to jump right into it. Abi, hope you're ready. Can you tell us how you came to faith?
I can. Yes.
Awesome.
I did not grow up going to church. We kind of we would go on Christmas and Easter. We were Creasters.
Sure.
And then
Creasters.
we would go through little phases. We would go like with my grandparents or with friends, but it was never consistent. And I was thinking about it yesterday, actually. I can't think of a single time we ever prayed together as a family or like had any sort of conversation about anything
Just
biblical.
was not part of the fabric of your family life.
Not even a little bit. And I always preface this by saying my parents are the best and I love them. And we're super close, but they both grew up in very religious households. And so I think they each kind of had their own faith, but overcompensated and didn't want to force any sort of like religion on us, and therefore we just didn't talk about God or Jesus or anything like that.
It's kind of non-religious.
Yes.
More or less.
Yes. But I was raised very much, looking back now, I know it was with like Christian kind of morals and principles. So I was very much raised like be a kind person, love others, serve others, do the right thing. And even getting into like high school, it was like, you're not going to drink, you're not going to sleep around, you're not going to do any of that stuff. And I was very much a rule follower growing up. Like I had a lot of anxiety and was terrified of doing anything wrong. So like they told me these things and I was like, yep, sounds good. I will not do them, and like never ask questions. But that was kind of my upbringing. And so it was like great family, solid, great friends, but just never heard anything about Jesus or God or any of that.
So just to clarify, you do feel like you were raised with sort of a Christian ethic, but it was devoid of the name of Christ being proclaimed in a regular way within your family structure.
Yes. It was like I had all of the puzzle pieces except the one that like gave you the actual picture. And I was like, well, I'm just missing like the why and like what that looks like.
Okay.
Yeah. But I didn't know that. I just was like, well,
Sure.
This is how you live life because my parents said so and I don't ask questions. So, and so I went to college. And I went to Tennessee Tech to play soccer. And so when you play a fall sport, you have to get there like a month early for preseason. And so you're the only people on campus. It was literally my team and the football team.
Soccer, right?
Yes, I played soccer. And so I pretty quickly got close with all of my teammates. I was 9 hours from home. I'm from Libertyville, Illinois. It's a Chicago suburb. So very different culture.
Than the old South down here?
Yeah, Putnam County was very different than Chicago.
I imagine it would be.
And I didn't know anyone. No one from my high school had heard of Tennessee Tech, so I was on my own there. 9 hours from my family. And so I very quickly got close to my teammates because we're spending like 9 hours a day together at practice. You had 3 days all summer, so we got really tight. And I had really great girls on my team. But the culture of the team is definitely set by the older students, the juniors and seniors. They've been there, they know people. And so the culture on my team when I showed up was very much like a party culture. And so we got into school, and that all of my friends, it was every weekend. They were going out to parties. They hung out with a lot of the other sports teams, and that was pretty much what we did. Every weekend we would go to class, and then we'd go to parties. Me being an 18-year-old on my own, 9 hours from home, finally able to make my own decisions, still said, my mom said I shouldn't drink, so no thanks, and just didn't.
That's a hard choice to make.
Looking back, I have no idea why. Because, like, I think now it very much was just God protecting me, even though I didn't know him at the time.
Yeah.
But at the time, like, I look back and I'm like, what? I followed the peer pressure of my parents instead of all of the friends that I was with. Like, I was the only person at these parties not drinking, but I was like, my parents said I shouldn't. So.
That's lit. I'll tell you, every parent wishes their kid would follow their peer pressure instead of that of their friends.
Yeah, I can't explain it, but that's what I did. So it got established that I was just kind of my team's DD, designated driver.
Yeah.
So I would go with him to the parties. I would drive him there. I would hang out, and then I'd drive him home. And I was okay with it because they were my friends, and I knew that
so
they
you
were
were
safe.
there often.
Mm-hmm. Every weekend.
Interesting.
Every weekend. Yep. And I knew they were safe. I knew I could take care of them. Cleaned up a lot of puke my freshman year. Nice. But I was able to, like, for me, I grew up, help people. And so I was like, well, I'm helping them. I'm making sure they're safe. But I quickly realized that I hated being at these parties because my friends, as soon as we got there were a lot of guys there, and their priorities quickly shifted. And they were like, see you later. We'll see you when the night's over. And I was like, okay. And then the guys I was meeting, I just wanted friends. I was new. I didn't know anyone. And I picked up pretty quickly that as soon as they found out that I wasn't going to drink and I wasn't going home with anyone, they moved on. And they didn't really have an interest in getting to know me after that. And that didn't sit right with me because I was like, I'm an extrovert. I like people. I just want to hear people's stories and get to know them. And none of y'all are interested in that.
None of you want to be my friend.
I don't understand. I would hang out with dogs at parties. Like, I was that girl for sure.
Man.
So I remember there were a lot of tears my freshman year. It was a change for sure. And I was talking to my mom one day and was like, I hate this. I don't feel like I have good friends. I had a really solid friend group in high school, and I was like, I don't have good people that, like, genuinely are looking out for me and want to be with me. And she actually suggested that I go to FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, on campus. And her whole reasoning was, you're an athlete. You're going to meet people that you have something in common with there. They're going to understand your schedule. They're going to understand that college athletics is crazy and You're not going to hang out all the time. But you'll probably find some people there that are not into the party scene as much. So she was like, you should go just to find friends. So I went to FCA to find friends, and I did find friends, but also found Jesus while I was there. So it was
double win.
it was a good place to go. But yeah, I started going, found a group of friends there that was just, like, really solid. And pretty quickly they took me in and, like, were showing up at our games every weekend supporting. And
cool.
Like, they were awesome. Yeah. And so I started going, and I was hearing these lessons preached week after week, and they would bring in guest preachers every week and stuff, because FCA is not tied to, like, a particular church. So they would bring in a bunch of different people. And every time I heard a lesson, I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, that makes sense, because I had been raised, love people, love your neighbor, all of that.
Yeah, the message was resonating, even though the names associated with it maybe were less familiar to you.
Yes. So, like, nothing I heard was blowing my mind. I was like, oh, yeah, all of this makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And then I remember one day after the lesson, they had us split up, and they said, we want you to get in groups of 2 or 3 and just share kind of your story and when, like, a big turning point for you was, when you really realized, like, oh, I'm following Jesus now. And so the other 2 girls in my group went first, and I heard their stories of, like, well, I used to be living like this, and then things drastically changed. That's a lot of times how it goes. Yep. And I remember thinking, I don't think I have a story. Like, and I had never thought through that before because everything just made sense to me. I was like, sure, this sounds great. And that was the first time I had to really process through, like, wait a second, I think I might be missing something here. So I started to kind of observe after that, which I'm a behavior analyst now, so I think I've always kind of...
It's always been there.
Yes, I study people. So I started observing the girls. We would do, like, a girls' Bible study, and I would hang out with these girls all the time, and I started really kind of looking and seeing, like, what am I missing? Because I'm missing something here. And there was one girl in particular, her name was Haley Robertson. We called her Robbie. She's Haley Woodison now, so like Robbie has nothing to do with her name anymore, but
It's okay. It
I know
sticks.
her as Robbie, yes.
Sure.
And she was kind of the leader of the girls in FCA, and she was one of those people, I don't have a bet, like this is such a cliche term, but she just like overflowed with Jesus.
Yeah.
You couldn't go 5 minutes with having a conversation with this girl without her bringing up something related to God. And it was never academic of like, well, I was studying and I learned this. I mean, sometimes she would, but it was usually just like, yeah, I really didn't want to get up this morning, but then God was like, hey, I got plans. And then I was like, okay, you know, like it was like the most like casual.
Just living it.
Yes.
That's
but
great.
he was so entwined in everything she did that like she couldn't talk about her day without talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so she was the one that really stood out to me. And I was like, wait a second. That's different.
I don't have that.
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
And so I started really observing more and trying to figure it out. And in the middle of all of this, we had College Advance, which is an FCA camp for college students, and it's in the spring. And all of my friends were going and said, hey, you should come to this. It's really fun. So I said, great. And I got on a bus and went to spend a weekend with people that I had known for a couple months in a cabin.
No big deal.
Yeah. College
That's
is
college.
a weird time, yeah. You just roll with stuff.
That's right.
So I go to College Advance, and College Advance is really good about, they always make sure they preach the gospel at some point because they know so many college athletes a lot of times don't come from faith upbringing.
Sure.
And so there's always a group of kids in the room that has not heard it. So it was the first time I really heard the gospel just like laid out, explained. And I was like, oh, like all this time I've been thinking God's just kind of this big person up in the sky that like reigns sovereign and watches down on us.
Yeah.
But you're telling me that like Jesus died for Abby, not just like, oh, Jesus died for humanity, but like for me
Personal
personally.
connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
That blew my mind.
Awesome.
And that was when I started to kind of think through like, oh, so you don't just want to like watch what we do as human beings. You want a relationship with me as a person.
Yeah.
So I was thinking through all of that. And then at the same time, they did a lesson on control, which I'm a highly anxious person and an Enneagram 1. So that was a hard lesson for me.
I bet. Resonated strongly.
Yeah. I don't do emotions or tears, but that one wrecked me because they talked about how you don't have to control everything in your life. And when you try to control everything in your life, it's really exhausting. And I had been doing that for 18 years at this point. I'm also a perfectionist. So it was like I felt like I had to make sure everything in my life was going perfect because I wanted to be a good person and I wanted to be someone that was successful and my parents were proud of. So I had to make sure that that happened. And so when someone told me, no, you don't, I was like, what? Thank you.
Really?
That's so nice.
This is great news.
So it was after that I went back to Sherry Ferris, who was our FCA staff member for tech. And I really didn't know her super well. I had just seen her at meetings and stuff. And so I went back to her, and I knew nothing still at this point. I was very much a baby. So I went back to her crying and was like, I want to pray the prayer that makes me love Jesus. And she was like, well, there's not like a specific prayer. And I was like, just tell me what to do. And she was like, okay. So she prayed with me, and I consider that very much like the turning point when I was like, okay, I'm in this. Like, I don't know what this is fully. I don't totally get it, but like I'm in it. And so we got back from College Advance, and she wrote me a letter and just said like, hey, I'm praying for you. I'm proud of you. I'd love to start getting coffee or lunch or something like that regularly. And me, if I do something, I'm going to do it 110%. So I was all in at this point. I was like, yes, absolutely.
Every
as much
day.
as you want to meet, like, I'm in.
I can drink so much coffee.
So many lunches. As a college kid, I really was down for lunch all the time.
Well, especially if someone else is going to pay for it.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure. I know how that goes.
So I started meeting with Sherry. And I credit her for so much of my foundation in my faith, as well as how I've learned to disciple people. It comes from the way Sherry discipled me.
Awesome.
And I didn't even, like, she wasn't necessarily actively teaching me it at the time. It's just what I saw being done. And then looking back now, I'm like, oh, that's my method. That's how I do it, because it's what changed my life. So she started meeting with me regularly, and it was not like a Bible study. She didn't have a curriculum. She literally, the first meeting was just like, so tell me about yourself. Tell me about your life. Like, what's going on? And for the next 5 years of my life, however long I was in Cookeville, that continued. And so during all of that time, she filled a lot of roles for me because she was a friend when I needed a friend. She knew everything that was going on. She knew all of the stuff going on with my team, with my family. Like, she was just cared and wanted to know.
Yeah.
She was a parent when I needed a parent because mine were 9 hours away.
Sure.
Now she was 8 years older than me, so she's not old enough to be my parent. But
Maybe like a big sister kind of thing.
But she had kids. And so she invited me into her family, and I would go have family dinner with them, and I would go babysit her kids and go hang out with them. And so she gave me a family when mine was really far away. She was a mentor. And so when I needed advice, we had such a strong relationship that I went to her about everything. She knew everything going on in my life. And she was a teacher when I had questions. So I could go to her and say, hey, I don't understand this concept. Hey, I was reading this and I'm confused. And she would walk me through it. But it was very much, she kind of let me lead it based off of where I was at. Mm-hmm. And so she was amazing. Yeah. But through that, I started to really grow and learn everything everything that I didn't know before about Jesus. And it wasn't like a drastic change in my life because I had been raised.
You had that Christian ethic operating under the surface already.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just I had a why for it now. Mm. I knew what my purpose was behind all of it. And she started challenging me to be missional. And so she was like, okay, so you know this. Well, what do you do with this? And at the same time, I was starting to get plugged in with a campus ministry at College Side. And that's where I was attending church and stuff because FCA doesn't have a church. And so while I was there, Chip Pugh also took me in, who's a campus minister there. And he's very regimented. And so it was kind of, I had the combination at this point of Sherry, that was the relational side, and then Chip, that's like all about different methods and procedures. And so he actually hired me to be the intern for the campus ministry, which is crazy when I look back on it, because I'm like, I had known Jesus for like 2 years.
What did I know?
And you want to be leading college kids? Like,
well, he saw something in you that was inspiring and had the potential to inspire others, which is great.
Apparently. I'm very thankful for him.
Yeah.
But he challenged me straight up and said, you need a list of 3 people that is your outreach list that you are constantly trying to be in their life. And so I learned from him to like set goals, write them down, that sort of stuff. And then Sherry, I learned kind of how to pursue it. And so I started doing that. I realized that the culture on my team was not one of faith at all. And I was like, well, I can change that. So we started, first off, I was so hungry that like I hated missing anything at church. Hated it.
Yeah.
My campus ministry would do a lot. So we would have Wednesday nights, we would have a lesson. We would do Thursday nights. We called it late night praise. We would do singing in a dark room with the lights out. It was the coolest thing ever.
Always fun.
Loved it.
I know.
And then we'd have Sundays, and then, people would hang out. But, like, we'd be on the road. If you're on the road, you're on the road from Wednesday to Sunday.
For soccer.
Right. Yeah. And so I'd miss all of it. And so I'd be sitting on the bus like, oh, they're at midweek peak right now. They're at late night praise right now.
Singing like, right now.
I'm missing it. Literally would be tweeting like, I just wish I were with my friends praising Jesus, but I'm on this bus listening to Jesus music instead. Like,
and meanwhile, your soccer friends are like, I see your tweet, Abby, sitting in front of me. Cool.
100%. That's what was happening. Like staring at the window on the bus, like melodramatic. But that was my attitude about things. So we would have mandatory, like, oh, we're all going to go to the basketball game and support, because athletes support athletes. And my coach would tell us we had to do it. And I straight up, I don't know where I got this courage
boldness
from. Yeah. Yes. But I would go to my coach and be like, hey, I can come till half, but then I have to go because I have church and that's more important. Right. And my coach was a believer. And this was like, I did well in soccer. And so I pretty quickly became a leader on the team because I did well and I did the right thing off the field. And so my teammates saw that and respected me quite a bit. And he knew that.
So you kind of earned the right to bow out every now and then.
I straight up said to him, if you want me to lead this team towards faith, which I know that that's something that's important to you, I need you to let me be at church sometimes because I don't know how to do it if I'm not there. And
cool.
He said, okay.
All right.
I was like,
that's convincing argument.
Yeah, so I started, making a priority of that. But then also we would go on the road and I would lead a Bible study in the hotel on Sundays. And I would just tell the girls, hey, anyone that wants to come. It's going to be in my room. Like, come 30 minutes before breakfast. We're going to do a Bible study. And we started praying before games and that sort of stuff. Looking back on it, I have no idea what I was doing with that Bible study. I was like, what? But
Yeah.
This is what I tell people all the time, like, and we'll get into this later. It was not about what I was saying at the Bible study. It was that it was so important to me that I was making that a priority on the road, and my teammates saw that.
Sure.
I honestly, like, Michael and I weren't even dating at the time. He was just one of my good friends, but I called him all the time, like, hey, I'm doing a Bible study tomorrow, and I don't understand any of this concept in this book I'm reading, so, like, can you give me a crash course so I can teach it tomorrow? And he was like, okay.
All right.
But, we did it.
Cool.
But over the course of the next 3 years, we baptized 8 of my teammates.
Wow.
And the
That's
culture
amazing.
of my team shifted drastically to where we had days that we were blasting worship music in the locker room. And, like, they begged me to bring Chip in to pray before our fitness test because they were all so stressed out. They're like, we just need prayers. Like, can you bring him in to pray for us?
Chip, your campus ministry guy.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And, yeah, it was the coolest thing.
Wow.
And so, yeah, the culture of my team shifted quite a bit. And obviously it had nothing to do with me knowing a lot or, like, I had no clue what I was doing.
That's such a valuable point to make, especially, and we'll kind of hit this at the end, I suppose, but so often Christians, whether they're young or older, feel like they don't have enough knowledge or skill set or something like that to be able to effectively minister to people. But you're demonstrating with your story that you didn't have any of that stuff other than the will to just go and do. And if you needed information, you could call somebody, give me a crash course. I don't know what I'm reading, but I'm going to definitely lead a Bible study with my friends. And you just did. And the fruit of that is evident, which is pretty amazing.
It was super cool to see. Because, yeah, I had no clue what I was doing, but I was like, I know I'm supposed to do this, so I'm going to. And again, it was kind of like the dumb confidence of this is something that is so life-changing and so important. Like, why would I not be sharing this with the people that I'm around? And so we kind of went from there. And then, after I graduated, I got hired by FCA. And while I was in grad school, I led Tech FCA for 2 years and worked with the youth ministry at the church I was at and got super involved from there. So it's kind of like I hit the ground running and just like haven't really stopped running. But yeah, that's kind of the summary of it.
Speaking of not really stopping, I kind of wanted to shift for the last few minutes of our time here and talk about what you're doing now, because obviously you're not in Cookeville anymore. You guys have moved here, Chattanooga. You're an adult person. You have a job. Like, you're kind of in that I'm a young professional now mode, which is not like being a college kid. It's some similarities, but it's also totally different. But you have not just decided to stop trying to be a missional person, and there are various things that you're trying to do. So why don't you spend a couple of minutes here telling us how are you? Our church's mission is to reach the next person for Jesus. We talk about it all the time: podcasts, Sunday mornings, various other media that we do here at Clear Creek. But I know you're trying to live that mission of reaching whoever the next person is. So what are some of the ways you're doing that? You can talk about young pros, you can talk about soccer stuff, whatever you want to do here. Give us a couple minutes on that.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the most effective way I'm doing it is with soccer still, which is hilarious to me, but apparently that's my area. So when we got here, I joined just like a rec league for fun with some of the guys from City Collective, actually, just because I like soccer and I wanted to meet people. And that has been going on for 2 years now, and I've been playing in the same league. We play in a Tuesday night league at the same place with the same people, and our team has changed over time. So the City Collective team kind of dissolved, and during that time, I had a couple of friends move into town. One was a friend from Illinois, actually, that I played club soccer with, and another one was a friend from Tech. And so I pulled them in and was like, hey, I'm playing in a league. Y'all want to form a team? They were in. And so we started playing together, and I've been playing with them for like a year now in these rec leagues. Well, one of the girls, a girl from Tech, grew up a believer, but hasn't had like a faith community. She didn't really have a good one in college, and then didn't have one in chat. She moved here for work, didn't have a lot of connections. So my primary goal with her was to pull her into a faith community. The other girl has no faith background whatsoever. And so I was like, okay, let's do this. And it was kind of terrifying because we grew up playing club together, but like ran in very different circles. Like we never like had issues or anything, but we weren't like friends by any means.
Yeah.
She was always way cooler than me. And so it was a little bit terrifying to be like, hey, I know you just moved here. Do you want to be my friend and play soccer with me?
Do you remember back in the day?
Right. And she was like, yeah. I was like, okay, cool. And then as we were playing soccer, I was chatting with her and just trying to catch up and get to know her, and realized she moved here for her boyfriend's work and has no connections, no friends in the area, nothing. So I was like, okay, I got to reach out to this girl. Like, I got to pull her in, which again was terrifying. And I had a really, like, I have a great friend group through our Young Pros, you know, but I was like, this is my one right now.
You're on the front line though,
right,
with this person.
This is my one. And so we started hanging out, and actually reached out to my tech friend and said, hey, this is my mission here. We need to pull her in. Like, she needs a community, she needs people. And she jumped on that.
Awesome.
Which was really cool to see her kind of step into that leadership role of like, yeah, I'm in, let's do it.
Great.
So since then, we've been hanging out, the 6 of us, because it's me and the 2 girls and then their significant others and Michael, pretty at least like once or twice a month. We all get together and like just go do something. So I'm seeing them there, plus I'm seeing them at soccer once a week, and then we joined a Thursday league together, so twice a week. So I'm seeing them very, very regularly. And that's kind of been my primary outreach right now, is that group of 4, 2 of them pulling them into a community and 2 of them helping them learn who Jesus is.
Sure.
And then, so right now we're very much in the relationship building stage with them.
Yeah.
I know the 2 from Illinois. Illinois is a very different culture when it comes to church. And so I know it's going to take a little bit for them to be open to any sort of conversation about church specifically. So Hoots, my friend, and I just try to like live it out in our lives. But through soccer, I've also then, because we've just been consistent, we've been playing in the same league with the same people. So I have another girl that reached out to me from a team that we play against. I really don't even know her, that said, hey, I play in a Wednesday league with the same people. That's 8v8. We need a couple more. Would you play with us? So that's going to start this summer.
Wow.
I'm joining another league with some girls that I'm hoping will give me another one. So while I'm waiting for this relationship to build, I've got another one that I can be working on over here, because it's a whole new group of people that I don't know. I've just formed these relationships with and this familiarity with through being in a consistent rec league soccer league.
Yeah.
So yeah, super kind of random, not really my intention with joining it, but it's something that I'm doing regularly and seeing the same people regularly, and it's given me a place where I can find people who don't have a faith background, because I think that's the hardest thing sometimes when you're so involved in a church, is you're around church people all the time.
Yeah.
Which is great, and you need that support to strengthen you, but if you're not using it to then go out, you're not using it. And so soccer has kind of been my primary area where I'm around people who are my age, because I can find people in my work for sure, but I work with a lot of people that are different age demographics and stuff, which is not impossible to outreach to, but harder.
Sure. It's different.
Yeah, and so soccer gives me a group of people that are my age that I'm around consistently, and some of them don't know Jesus.
And it's a casual environment too, rather than the professional environment, which has different challenges.
It is, but it also gives me opportunities to kind of set myself apart, just in that it's competitive. And so the fact that I'm not cussing people out on the field, and
you can be a competitor, but without being a crazy person.
Right. I mean, honestly, that'll set you apart.
I imagine so. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So I know that you've also been very much involved in helping to organize some community with the young professionals, and your husband and Sean Alex talked about that a couple of weeks ago on a different podcast. And so I think it's really neat how you're sort of dipping into both sides of this. You're helping in sort of I hate to use this word, but I think it's right, kind of the institutional church mode, like with like a group of young professionals, affinity based, you're all the same age, same phase of life. You're kind of helping to build and nurture that environment, as you said, so that you can grow and be encouraged. But if that's all you ever did, then you're not putting to use all of these tools that you've been given. So you've got the other side of it where you're just going out and living on mission, doing something you love, which makes it easy to want to be there, but you're doing it with purpose and intentionality, which is so good for all of us to hear, whether it's work or play or neighborhood. If we're not putting to use all of the things we've been blessed with in as far as our church community goes, we're kind of missing out on the mission. which is to reach the next person for Jesus. Great commission. Jesus said it first, not us. So I want to kind of skip down towards the end of this here, because you've answered a lot of these questions as you've talked here. But what personal obstacles do you feel like you still struggle to overcome?
I mean, the common one that you're going to hear with this is fear. It's kind of terrifying because you're putting yourself in a place to get rejected. And you can hear the answer of like, well, it's not you getting rejected, it's Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, but
it's
I was
also
hoping
me.
He would use me. Like, it still hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think a bigger one that I've really recently started to kind of process through is when you are in a position where you're around people who aren't believers and you are maybe one of the only sources of Jesus in their life. Some of them, because they don't have the understanding of, like, yes, I'm trying to show you Jesus, but I'm still a human being, kind of put you on a pedestal. And therefore, if you do anything wrong, there are going to be people that are huge critics of you because of how they view you. And learning how to process, like, I had 3 people that were very important to me in college that, like, completely decided they despised who I was as a human being, which was really hard to handle. And everything in me wanted to be like, no, you don't understand. Like, I care about you. I love you. It was tough. I still don't think I figured it all out, but learning to process through, like, that's kind of a side effect of being on mission around people who don't know Jesus, because you may be the only source of Jesus in their life and you're not going to be able to be Jesus. And so you're going to let them down at some point, and that's okay. That means that you're trying and you're in the right field. So that's been tough to process through, for sure.
It's interesting, that idea of some people are going to just try to knock you off the pedestal that they have perhaps put you on themselves, which I guess that's a good thing to think about. Maybe early on in a relationship with somebody that you're trying to disciple, is being authentic in the sense that let them know that you don't think you have it all figured out. Like, be honest about the fact that you are still a sinner saved by grace. Therefore, you're probably going to see me mess up. Don't let that be indicative of my God. Just let that be indicative of the fact that I'm still also just a person.
Right.
It's hard though. That's tough. I appreciate that insight. That's a good point for us. Okay, so kind of wrapping us all up, you've had a wonderful story to tell us. I appreciate that. And I've enjoyed hearing some of how you've continued to practice missionality and things. But as we've asked many people on this podcast, a lot of people are going to hear this and they're going to think, oh man, that's great. It's inspiring. But I don't have that story, but I don't have that, drive or that knowledge or that avenue of, rec league soccer. I don't have X, Y, or Z. So I'm not sure that I'm equipped to do this mission thing. What would you say to the person that doesn't feel like they've got what they need, or that it's somebody else's job to do this mission?
Well, first, kind of like you said, I 100% didn't have anything. Like, I was clueless. So if I can do it, you can do it.
There you go.
But also, depending on your method of making disciples, if you are not a natural teacher like you or Michael or Josh, I'm not a teacher. Actually, I am by profession, but not when it comes to biblical things. I don't have the foundation to do it biblically. So I'm not going to sit down and like teach this amazing lesson. I'm going to be in someone's life consistently and be their friend consistently. And then when they hit something hard in their life, or when they see that there's something different and they want to ask more questions, I'm there and we have the relationship to be able to do that. That's the only way I know how to disciple effectively, is by just being a friend and being consistent. And so anyone who would say that they don't have the tools, if you know how to be a friend, you know how to do it. That is a method that you can use regularly, time and time again.
And that's how you were discipled by the Lady Sherry, right?
Right. And we try to, we've had one of the soccer girls stayed in our house for 2 weeks because she was in between leases. Like, we just try to be available for people when they need you. And then when they really need you and something's going bad, they know you're there.
Yeah.
So as long as you know how to be a friend, you know how to do it. And also, for people that say that they're maybe not in the right field or don't have that area, I would kind of challenge people with the question of, do you have any friends that don't know Jesus? Because I think sometimes we're so trained to like surround yourself with believers, which is important because you need the support system. But if you don't have any friends in your life that don't know Jesus, you don't have anyone to reach. So look around in your work and where your hobbies are. There is someone there that doesn't know Jesus. Befriend them, because it's easy for us to befriend the Christians when we enter a new space because we have a lot in common with them. So a lot of times you'll show up to a new space and say, oh, it's so great, I met this person and they go to church here, and I met this person and they go to church here, and you meet other believers. But if you go to the spaces you're in looking for the people that don't know Jesus, a lot of times that's not your instinct, but that's how you're going to make those friendships that then you can use to be on mission.
That's great. Great reminders and great insights for us to consider. I appreciate that. Well, Abby, that's all the time we got for today's podcast. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story of faith and how that's continued to develop over time. Thank you. And just thank you for being here at Clear Creek with your husband and working with us and doing great things here. But all the rest of you out there, if you are a Christian, you have been called to spread the good news of Jesus Christ throughout your neighbors and your city and to the very ends of the earth. Grace and peace.